I hope the story that I'm telling makes sense. Okay, so I'm trying to get comfortable here. I tried recording this video before, but in a different room, in a more comfortable chair. My cats wouldn't let me, so I'm doing it at my desk. I don't want to keep doing videos here, but this kind of seems like the best setup, the best option. So I don't know how to start this video. If you have been here before, then you know I recently decided to start a series called Figuring Out Who I Am as an Adult. And I wanted to start from the beginning of my issues and things like that, and basically do my shadow work in real time with you guys, instead of, you know, keep doing personal growth as like, you know, the shiny happy bits. Want to be 100% real and share my life experiences and how they affected me, how I'm working through them, and, you know, how they made me who I am today. So I have my notes here of what I'm going to talk about. And forewarning that this has to do with my dad's death. So if you are uncomfortable or do not want to listen about death, I completely understand, and now would be the time to click off and not listen. I thank you for listening this far, but if it's not something that you can do, then please just click off. The video about my dad's death may be a two-parter. I'm not sure right now, but basically I want to go through what the process was of me dealing with this, or finding out the information that I found out. I'm making this like really awkward because I'm unsure how to go about this. So I guess I'm just gonna start. My dad died when I was 2.5. So I don't really know him. I don't really know anything about him. And growing up, asking my mom questions about him, she kind of just would blow me off or give me some kind of generic answer. I'm finding this really hard to talk about. How my dad died is not something that I straight up offer to people. It's if the subject comes up and you ask, I will tell you, but normally it is not a topic that I willingly offer up. And it's not that I'm embarrassed by it or anything like that. It's just I don't know what else to say about it. But basically, my dad was electrocuted by a microwave. And I've always known that growing up, but I never thought anything of it. And about I want to say over 10 years ago, when I was in my 20s, I started this process because I was like, man, I don't know anybody on my dad's side I don't know any of his family on my dad's side. I was looking him up on Google and I found a site called findagrave.com where someone had kind of made a memorial of him. And they had pictures of me on there. They mentioned me. And I was like, how does this person know my dad? So I left a comment because people could leave comments of like, my condolences, things like that. And so I commented and was like, hey, that's my dad. How do you know my dad? And somehow we, ended up exchanging information and becoming friends on Facebook. And it was my grandma's sister, who we call Aunt Jeannie. She was the one that runs the Find a Grave for a lot of our family members. So she introduced me to more members of my dad's family and things like that. And some of us, we have become friends on Facebook. We talk regularly, things like that. Some, not so much. So this started over 10 years ago, but I didn't ask the questions that I should have been asking. And I don't think as a 20-year-old, I was ready for that. I mean, I wasn't on a personal growth journey or anything like that. So I didn't really, I just kind of asked like the basic questions, like, when's his birthday, like all that, just basic information. And that's what I was given. But now that I am older and I am working on myself and trying to work through all my issues, I'm now asking the right questions. But there was one thing that stuck out to me back then that I have been thinking this whole time, but kind of didn't say it or didn't bring it up or just thought it was absurd for me to think it. I kind of want to go over that and how I found out that I'm not alone in thinking this. So we're going to start at the beginning of what work I was doing and go from there. So when I first decided that I was going to start with my dad's death, obviously because I was 2.5, I just wanted some, again, basic information. I kind of wanted to just like ease myself into it. So I messaged my sister, because she was a teenager when this happened. And I was like, she will know more than I would, being 2.5. So the questions that I found myself asking was, don't mind me, I'm referring to my notes. The questions that I asked were, how did my mom and dad meet? How long were they together before they had me? And when did they get married? I asked my sister these questions. And I phrased the questions like this because me, my brother, and my sister all have different dads. So I asked the question, do you know how long mom and my dad were together before they had me? And her response was, not long, it was mom, so like within months she was pregnant. And I said, well, how long were they married before they had me? And she said she didn't know. And I always make jokes when it comes to serious topics and stuff like that. So I made the joke of, were they actually really even married? Haha. And she said mom just came to her one day and said that they were married. And I was like, oh wow, I wish there was pictures. And my sister said, I don't know a date. It was probably a courthouse and I never saw a picture. And I was like, that sucks, man. So I didn't get much from my sister. So I decided to ask my Aunt Jeannie, my grandma's sister. And because I was like, if she knows anything about anything, she's the one that like runs all this for the family, so maybe she'll know something. But she didn't. She didn't. And that's understandable, like, you know. But she directed me to my aunts, my dad's sisters. I sent a group message on Facebook and was just like, hey, I have some questions about my dad, and I was just wondering if you guys could shed some light on it for me. And my Aunt Tina responded quick and was like, what do you need? I will answer anything you ask. I started asking, again, just the basic questions. How did they meet? How long were they together before they had me? Like, you know, and she gave me some basic information, but then eventually she was like, just call me. So I ended up calling her, and we were on the phone for almost 5 hours. 5 hours just talking about everything. And there were things that surprised me and things that I was like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, yeah. Like we started out with some basic information about my dad. And I can say, I mean, his name is Michael Leroy Pugh. He was born September 27th, 1961, and he passed away February 10th, 1988. He was 26 years old. I always thought that they grew up in Mississippi because I always hear Mississippi, Mississippi, Mississippi when I'm talking to my family members, but I was actually surprised to find out that they grew up in Florida. So my aunt was telling me like that they lived in Hudson, they lived here, they lived there. They kind of just lived all over in the general area on the west coast of Florida. She was telling me the elementary schools they went to, the middle schools. She told me that he graduated Northeast High School in St. Pete in 1980. That would make him 19 years old. She was telling me how he had a girlfriend before he went into the military, but they ended up breaking up. And he went into the military after high school, and he got out in like 1983, 1984 era. So that kind of narrows down when him and my mom met, because I was born in 1985, and if he got out in 83, that's a 1-year gap. So, she even gave me their like childhood house. She gave me general directions to the house. So as I said, my dad was electrocuted by a microwave, and my last memory, my only memory of him is moments before he died. And the way that I have remembered it my whole life was that my parents, my mom, me, and my dad were in a room of our house, and they were hanging up curtains. And my mom was on the right, my dad was on the left, and I was laying in the middle on the floor playing with toys. And they were talking and putting up the curtains and like arguing and stuff like that. And my mom asked my dad to go fix the microwave because my dad was a licensed electrician. So it wasn't uncommon for him to fix our appliances or things like that, because that's what his job was. I remember him walking into the kitchen, and then that's kind of where my story ends with him. I don't remember anything before that, and I don't remember anything after that moment. So my story ends and everyone else's story begins. It's a wild roller coaster because my mom never talked about my dad growing up. And as I said, asking her questions, I would get the general responses or just blown off being like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. It never sat right with me why she would do that. Or if I would ask, I would get the response of, your dad was an asshole. Even from my sister, sometimes my brother, your dad's an asshole. Your dad's an asshole. And that sucks because I don't know that. You know, now I'm going off of opinions of everyone else. So in talking with my aunt, I asked the question because she's telling me that they all grew up in Florida and stuff like that. And so the question came to me of why was he buried in Alabama and not Mississippi or Florida? And she said she did not want to say anything that would hurt my feelings, but I told her I needed to know everything, like even the smallest detail that you don't think is really anything. Tell me, like I want to know. So, and I told her that because I'm doing this for the blog and I'm doing this as a series on YouTube and making it a podcast and stuff like that, that I want and need to know everything, because this has affected me directly and indirectly my whole life. Or I need to share what had happened, how it's affecting me, and how I'm working to get through it. I need to, like, for my own sanity, like I just need to do this. So I just need to kind of listen to what everyone has to say and kind of just go from there and see if I can make sense of it in my head and make it to where it's something that I can live with for the rest of my life. That it's not going to bother me or affect me in the future. Like, I want to have all my ducks in a row. I want to lay all my cards on the table and be like, I never have to wonder what if again. Growing up, it didn't affect me as much because I was like, oh, my dad's dead. Like, there's nothing that I can do about that. But as I got older, I didn't have the best childhood growing up. And so I often spent a lot of time wondering, wondering what if my dad was still alive? Like, how different would my life be if he was alive? And I know necessarily that doesn't mean that my life would be, 100% better and 100% different than what it was, because then I wouldn't be who I am today. But as a child, as a teenager, you wonder that. You create these scenarios in your head of like, oh, if my dad was alive, like, God, I was like, I would have my own farm, I would have horses, like I would have all this, like he would be like the best dad in the world and I would just have the best life ever. But in reality, it could be completely different. Okay. It was on a roll and now my mind is like, so a lot of my childhood and teenage years were a lot of daydreaming about how my life would be if my dad was still alive. Even though I had my mom, my sister, sometimes my brother telling me that my dad was an asshole. And so I always had that sitting in the back of my mind of, oh, you wonder what your life would be like if your dad was alive. Well, you know what? According to everyone who is your immediate family, your dad was an asshole, so your life wouldn't be much better. Slowly just kind of gave up on that fantasy I had built in my head and stopped thinking about it until I was, again, in my 20s. And then that's when I was like, you know what? Like, I just need to know. Like, I need to know that there's different family out there. Because you always watch movies, or you always hear from friends and kids at school, like, oh, I went and I was hanging out with my cousins this weekend and we went and did this. And like, I went and saw my aunt and uncle, my grandpa. I never did any of that. And I always wondered what it would be like. Like I had my mom's best friends, which we considered, the kids' aunts. But they weren't really my cousins. They were my mom's best friend's kids. They're not cousins. Like, we are not directly related. Anyway, so talking with my aunt, I said I just needed to know everything that happened. And, I can't really say anything about it from my mom's end because my mom has also passed away and she always refused to talk to me about it. So I'm kind of just going off of what everyone else says and kind of just making my own final verdict of what's going on or what had happened. So in talking with my aunt, she said that she felt guilty for the longest time because my dad would call her on and off the few years that my mom and him were together and say, I'm leaving her, like I can't do this anymore. And he would always say it, but he would never actually do it because he would say my mom was a hitter and he just couldn't take it anymore. So I don't know if on his end he was trying to make my mom seem like the bad guy, and then on my mom's side they were all trying to make my dad the bad guy. But all I know is that they both drank and he could have been an asshole and my mom is an instigator. So those two mixed together just probably was not a good combination. So she said this one time he called her and said, that's it, like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving Donna. I'm going to pack up Michele and our stuff, and we are going to come to Mississippi if you can lend me the money to get up there. And my aunt said that she felt guilty about this and is the reason why she does what she does now, because she just got out of the military and was pregnant and had her first son. She had no job, living off of her income tax, barely making it by with a brand new baby. And he called and asked to borrow money to get us up there. And she had to tell him no. And that was 3 weeks before he died. And she is like, if I would have just given him the money, like he still could have been alive, like it could have potentially saved his life. And I told her that she needed to not feel guilty about that because she just had a brand new baby and that baby should be her number one priority in making sure that the baby has food, a place to live, diapers, like everything. My dad was a grown-ass man and could have done whatever he could to get the money if he was really going to leave my mom. Like, it's his responsibility. But she said all the times before that he didn't leave was because he wanted to stay because of my brother and sister. And when I told my sister that, my sister's like, why? He used to treat me like shit and used to beat the shit out of your brother. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, this is what I'm just being told. I was like, he told Aunt Tina that the reason why he didn't leave was because of you and Greg, because if he left, who was going to be there to protect you? And I'm like, I'm just relaying the information. I said, this is what I was told. When my sister told me that he used to treat her like shit and used to beat the shit out of my brother, but he would never put his hands on me, I felt instantly horrible, like secondhand guilt, that my brother and sister were treated like garbage by a person who helped create me. Like, if you really loved me that much, being your child, Like, how could you treat my brother and sister like shit? Like, that instantly made me feel guilty. And I know it has nothing to do with me, but just the fact that it was my father who would do this. Like, it's just secondhand guilt, and I shouldn't feel guilty, but I do because that's my dad. So he asked my aunt for the money. My aunt said no, felt guilty about not giving it to him. And she said that there was something in his voice this last time that he had called that kind of made it seem different than any other time that he had called before. You just end up always wondering what if, and it is never good to be in this constant what if I did this, what if I did that, what if they did this, and like, it's a never ending cycle, because as soon as you ask the question what if to anything, you are left with more what if questions, and then any decision that you make always ends up becoming a what if. So she said because of that instance of not giving my dad the money, that's why she does whatever she can now for anybody and throughout the years since it happened, because she always thinks that if she doesn't give this person the money or she doesn't do this for them, what if it ends up being another Michael situation? And I told her she needs to let that go. I know it's easier said than done, but that's why I'm doing this, because I need to work through my what ifs. So I'm going to read his obituary, because I said earlier that there had been something in the back of my mind that I always thought was preposterous, that it was crazy for me to think that, all because of this obituary. So that means I've been thinking about it for about 15 years. And I just need to say it publicly, because it's not something that, again, I offer up, because it is crazy for me to think it. But if you are close to me, then I have offered up this information when talking about my parents or things like that. And I've never done anything with it. I've even said it to my mom. Again, she blew me off, but we'll get into that after I read the obituary. So the obituary says, Hudson, a 26-year-old Hudson man, repairing a microwave oven while it was plugged into an electrical outlet, died from a severe electrical shock Wednesday night, sheriff's records said. The man's wife said she saw sparks coming from behind the oven and then heard her husband scream, fall backward onto the dining room floor. He pulled the microwave onto the floor beside him. Records said that the back was removed and a wire was dangling from the oven. The microwave had been having problems for a while, and the man had tried to fix it 3 weeks earlier. Michael Leroy Pugh appeared unconscious after the shock. He was taken to HCA Bayonet Point Hudson Medical Center and pronounced dead at about 8:30 p.m. Pugh's wife, Donna, 38, told deputies that she and her 2 children, Greg, 5, and Michele, 2, were sitting on the living room couch while Pugh was trying to fix the microwave. The woman said she ran to the neighbor's house to call an ambulance after the accident. Paramedics who arrived at the house about 7:45 p.m. tried to revive Pugh, but were not successful. Miss Pugh could not be reached for a comment Wednesday. A neighbor said she and her children were staying with friends. A spokeswoman for the Pasco County Medical Examiner's Office said the family requested that an autopsy not be done, and the cause of death had been determined to be electrocution. So the one line in the obituary says that the family requested not to have an autopsy done. And when it says family, it means my mom. My mom refused to have an autopsy. And that line right there just didn't sit well with me, because if you know 100% that he died of electrocution, what's the big deal in having an autopsy to have medical record prove the cause of death? Again, 100% absolutely electrocution. So that one line of her refusing the autopsy, and I know it's not, uncommon for people to refuse autopsies. I just don't understand, especially if you know 100% that this was the cause of death. Let's have a medical record to prove that, yes, it was 100% electrocution. So I'm going to say this out loud on camera and post it on the internet for the world to see. And it's not like my mom can dispute it. She's passed away. But even if she was alive, she would probably just gaslight me and ignore me and just blow me off anyway. So, I think my mother killed my father. I think my dad was worth more to her dead than alive. And I know that is a horrible thing to say. I know it's a horrible thing to say. That is why it's not something that I offer up, that I just randomly say and just post on the internet and things like that. Because how could someone ever think about that about their parent? But my logic in this is that my dad was a licensed electrician. Like, that's what he did for work. It's like electrician 101, not to work on things that are plugged in. So the way that I see things happening in my head is that he unplugged it, let the charge die out, thought it was safe. Like, I'm not saying 100% that he was like a saint and like followed the rules and everything, because when you're at work, you do things and you're like, well, I shouldn't do it this way, but I'm just gonna do it. Like, because he was wearing his wedding band, and that's what they say touched whatever it touched, and that's where the electricity went in. But my logic, again, is that he is a licensed electrician and probably thought, I'll unplug it and I will let the charge die out, and it's okay if I wear my wedding ring. Like, it's just a microwave. I'm just gonna do what I need to do. And that's my one reasoning, was that he was a licensed electrician. But the other thing that doesn't sit well with me is in the obituary, it also says that Donna ran to the neighbor's house to call 911. Are you telling me that you allegedly or possibly left your 5-year-old child and your 2-year-old child in a house alone with a person on the floor that has an electrical current running through his body? Because I have people telling me that when this happened, I was standing in the kitchen yelling like, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy, and crying, meaning that I was there. I was there watching him on the floor. So if you left to go to the neighbor's house to call 911, what would have stopped me because that's my dad, from running over and touching him. So then my question was, would I have been electrocuted if I touched him? I looked it up because I don't know. I'm not an electrician. So I looked up, can you touch a person who has been electrocuted? And according to www.sc.edu, it says, do not attempt to pull the person from the electrical source with your bare hands. You may be electrocuted. Remember, your body is a good conductor of electricity. If you touch the person while they are connected to the electrical source, the electricity will flow through your body, causing electrical shock. Electrical shock on my little 2-year-old body. I would have been dead too. So then I'm sitting there thinking, like, did we not have a phone? Did we not pay the bill? Like, why are you running to the neighbor's house? Why are you leaving your kids alone? And anyone who's asking, I said I had a sister. My sister was at work when this happened. So she had no idea that this was going on. So on the phone with my aunt, I'm saying, did we not have a phone? Did we not pay the bill? Like what? Why? And my aunt said, no, I do know that you guys had a phone because you guys would call me from it. So I'm like, so then why did she go to the neighbor's house? Why? Because she was trying to kill my dad. She knew. Subconsciously, she knew if she dilly-dallied, he would die. And then my aunt told me that she heard, especially in 1988, that the ambulance was given bad directions, meaning that they were not given correct directions to our house. Because in 1988, it's not like it is now. Like now, you can call 911, you give them your address, and then they can send it to the police, they can send it to the fire department, the ambulance, and it'll GPS any person to where you are. Not in 1988. And even then, you didn't call 911. You called the police station. You called the sheriff's office. And you would tell them what was going on, and you would give them directions. So she ran to the neighbor's house, wasting time, gave bad directions, and made the ambulance take longer. And if she would have given correct directions, that could have potentially saved his life. So I think she did it on purpose because as I said, my dad was worth more to her dead than alive because he served in the military. So he had all these benefits and things like that for when he died. And so telling my aunt that, my aunt says to me, my mom, and my dad, meaning my aunt, my grandma, and grandpa, all think the same thing, which kind of blew my mind because we've never had an in-depth conversation about my dad's death. And how is it that I can come to that conclusion on my own, 18 years later, and still think it 32 and a half years later, and they've been thinking it for 32 and a half years. So my aunt said that because they thought this, my grandmother called the Pasco County Sheriff's Office and said that she wanted an investigation done because she thought that my mom killed my dad. And they told her that something seemed a little off, but they didn't have enough evidence to do a full investigation. And that kind of pissed me off, which is understandable because I mean, I have a bachelor's in criminal justice, so I know like you have to have, more evidence to go on. My aunt said that when my mom had called, because they already kind of didn't like my mom because of the things that my dad was saying and how she was like an abuser, she was a hitter, things like that. And of course that my mom was an instigator and liked to start arguments and things like that. So my grandma kind of avoided talking to my mom. So when my mom called to tell my grandma that my dad had passed, my aunt that I'm talking to, Aunt Tina, picked up the phone and said that my mom was like, hey, I need to talk to Barbara. And my grandma said, like, no, like tell Donna I'm in the bath and I'll call her back. Like I just can't deal with her. So my aunt said to my mom on the phone, sorry, Donna, my mom's in the bath right now. Can she give you a call when she gets out? And this is the part that kind of shocked me, but kind of didn't. My mom's response was, don't bother her. My mom's response was, don't bother, just tell her fucking son's dead. And hung up the phone. What? Like, it like shocked me because like that's not how I would say it to somebody. But it also didn't surprise me because I was like, it kind of sounds like something my mom would do. This whole 5-hour conversation happened about 5 days ago. And I have been thinking about it nonstop since me and my aunt had this conversation. And the more I think about it, the more questions I have, and the more I'm like, everything that I believed as a child is like slowly coming undone. Like right now, I had that memory of my dad in a room with my mom, hanging up curtains and stuff like that. That was always the last memory, or like the only memory that I have of my dad that I like cherished, because I was like, I mean, it sucks it was that memory, but then I was like, at least I have one. But since I've spent the last 5 days thinking about this, I've come to realize the house that I have always thought my dad died in was not the house that he actually died in. So I thought he died in the house on Twilight, but it turns out he died in a trailer in Hudson, not the house on Twilight in Port Richey. So then I'm like, okay, so maybe the place is wrong. Maybe I just like picked that house because I liked that house. So I thought in my head like, oh, this is where it happened, But the memory itself actually did happen. But then I'm like, what if this is just a lie? What if this is a lie told to me as a kid, and I have just believed it my whole life? So then I'm questioning, is this memory real? Or was it something that I made up to make myself feel better, like a trauma response? like a coping mechanism, like I needed something to just hold on to. And now I might be coming to the realization that that's not a real memory I had. Maybe I don't remember anything about my dad. And that sucks, man. That sucks to think that the one thing that I had about him could potentially not be real. And I will never get clarity on that because my mom's dead and my mom refused to talk about it. And I think she refused to talk about it and talk about him and talk about his death because she would eventually end up slipping up and saying something about killing him. Because I am like 99.999% sure that she had something to do with his death. That he was working on the microwave, had it unplugged, and she was just like, you know what? And walked up and plugged it in while he was working on it and shocked him. Not even shocked him. We're just going to use the term. Fucking electrocuted him. In front of his kid. It just sucks that the thing that like hurts me the most is knowing that the one memory that I had of him potentially could be something I made up in my head. And I will never know. But I think that is where I'm going to end this for now. My mind is like all over the place right now. And before I continue on with the story and what happened and things that happened after his death, I want to be clear-headed and not emotional. And I want to be able to get through it without crying. At least like 90% get through it without crying. I'm an emotional basket case. Oof. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this first installment of me airing my dirty laundry. And that you stay and follow along my journey of figuring out who I am as an adult and working through my shit. If you are watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you are listening to this on a podcast platform, please follow along and share and just get this out to anyone who you think needs it. I mean, I've never met anyone else whose dad died. because he was electrocuted by a microwave. But if anyone has, I would really like to talk to you. So anyone that comes across this and listens to the whole thing, because it's a fucking shit show. And there is so much more that I should really write a book about this. But yeah, until next time, guys, I hope you have a better day than I'm having right now. I'll see you in the next one.